Hello and welcome to the virtual Waterfront Walking Tour. My name is Stina Troyer with Harbor WildWatch, and together with the Harbor History Museum and Downtown Waterfront Alliance, we have partnered to bring you waterfront walking tours for the past 6 years. Because of the current world situation, this year's tours will all be brought to you online. You can tune in to learn more about the different stops from the two of our popular tours, Skips to Spirits and the Wonders of the Waterfront. Today I'll be your guide for a segment of the Wonders of the Waterfront tour. I'm particularly fond of this tour because it explores the incredible wildlife and natural resources of Gig Harbor's past and present. Side note, even though I'm very passionate about Gig Harbor, please remember that I'm not a professional historian, and it's simply not possible to cover everything about Gig Harbor at each stop. So, if you'd like to, please share your stories and other knowledge in the comments section. You're also, of course, welcome to ask questions, and we'll do our best to answer them. Today we're going to talk about the Skansie family home. But before we get started, I'd like to take a moment to recognize that we're on the traditional lands of the Puyallup people and other speakers of the Southern Lushootseed language since time immemorial. The name for the Puyallup people in Lushootseed is Puyallup, which means generous and welcoming to all people. We acknowledge these people as the keepers of the land, and we pay our respects to them. With that, welcome to the historic Skansie House. Built in 1910, this property is a perfect example of repurposing a historic building for a modern use. We'll get to that more in a little bit, but first, let's learn about the history of this property and the family that lived here. The Skansie family immigrated from Croatia in 1889. They were fishermen and boat builders and built the 3 structures that you see here on this property. This house, the net shed just behind us, and the shipyard next door. I'm standing on the front porch of the home of Andrew Skansie, his wife Bertha, and their 5 children. Before his arrival to Gig Harbor, Andrew was a successful stonemason. He built a 1-story house in 1910, and then the 2nd story for his growing family in 1912. The net shed was also built in 1910, along with 2 deep water pilings that moored the Avalon, which was the family purse seiner. The shipyard next door is where our ferry story from a previous stop at Austin Estuary continues. The Skansie Shipbuilding Company was a boat repair business started in the early 1900s by Peter and Mitchell Skansie. The family business built approximately 140 wooden ships, many of which were fishing vessels. A handful of those original boats are still in operation today. How cool is that? While smaller steamboat vessels had already been in use for freight, mail, and passengers, larger ferry boats began being utilized here when the automobiles became more common. Before there was a bridge, a growing number of cars needed to be transported across Puget Sound to Tacoma. In 1926, as a cost-saving measure, Pierce County wanted to get out of the ferry business. The Skansie brothers bid on the ferry operation, and they won. Mitchell Skansie founded the Washington Navigation Company to handle the business, and they began construction of the diesel-powered 180-foot-long vessel named the Defiance. It had the capacity to hold 80 automobiles and served the route between Point Defiance at the northern tip of Tacoma, Point Fosdick at the southern tip of Gig Harbor Peninsula, and the town of Gig Harbor. You might remember that the first steamboat in the area only had room for 4 passengers. This new ferry was capable of speeds up to 18 knots per hour and featured the latest technology to ensure passengers' comfort and rapid loading. The company continued to operate its routes around the peninsula in Tacoma until 1938, when the state of Washington purchased 2 of its ferries. At this time, construction was underway on a suspension bridge spanning the nearly mile-wide Tacoma Narrows, which separated Gig Harbor and the Key Peninsula from the more heavily populated eastern shores of Puget Sound. The bridge opened on July 1st, 1940, but collapsed during a dramatic windstorm just 4 months later on November 7th. With the bridge gone, ferry service resumed to provide a critical transportation connection between the peninsula and Tacoma, with Skansie family again operating their ferry route. The completion of the 2nd Tacoma's Narrows Bridge in 1950 ended the ferry route between Gig Harbor and Point Defiance, as well as the Skansie's use of the Defiance and their ferry service operation. Today, the shipyard is used to repair recreational boats. The shipyard is also a marina for both local and visiting boaters. It's a brewery, rental property, and a retail shop. This building is called the Skansie Visitor Interpretive Center. It's operated by Harbor WildWatch, your local environmental education organization, and this facility provides visitor information as well as exhibits which highlight the local marine environment. Through a partnership with the city, this house became the home of Harbor WildWatch in 2014. Over the past 5 years, we have created an interactive space that encourages visitors to learn about our local marine environment and different ways that they can protect it. Our newest exhibit upgrade took place in 2017 and includes all sorts of wonderful things. There's a 100-gallon custom saltwater touch tank where you're invited to have a hands-on experience with some of your local sea creatures. There's a 50-gallon saltwater aquarium if you'd rather just look. You can also take a look into Gig Harbor Bay itself through the use of a live underwater camera. There's also a 3D augmented reality sandbox where you can play in the coolest sandbox ever and learn more about watersheds and how pollution can travel from the land into the Puget Sound based on our daily activities. In another room, you can observe the animal skulls on display with species from all around the world. You can even take a closer look by using the microscope and observe different static and live forms made available. Throughout the house, take time to look at the posters, which provide lots of other information. As you walk through, also remember to pay attention to the details, which have been well preserved in this historic home. And that's it for today's tour. Thank you so much for joining us on our exploration of the Skansie Visitor and Interpretive Center. Be sure to tune in next time for our tour at the Maritime Pier. And of course, tell your friends, family, and anyone thinking about visiting beautiful Gig Harbor to watch these videos and learn a little bit more about the waterfront and how we are all, past and present, tied to the water.